How do we rein in the likes of BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard? How do we make sure that they are not, because it's one thing to elect the right man to be president. That's going to help us, but with all the checks and balances and with all the deep state, all of those various things that are still pulling strings, how do we ensure that they're not going to be so incentivized? What will President Trump be doing in order to ensure that?
Making America great again!
To understand BlackRock, the insidiousness of BlackRock's influence, people should understand this. We gave this $200 billion, now $208 billion to Ukraine. And that money, I saw Mitch McConnell saying two things. He said, well, that money is actually not going to Ukraine, it's going to U.S. military contracts. He came out and said that openly. And then he says, but don't worry, it's not a gift, it's a loan. So Ukraine's going to pay it back. How many here, raise your hand if you think that loan's ever getting paid back? All right, everybody knows it's not. So why did they call it a loan? The reason they called it a loan instead of a gift is because if you call it a loan, you can impose loan conditions. What are those loan conditions? Number one, a giant austerity program, so nobody who's poor in Ukraine is ever going to even be able to eat. Most important, they required Ukraine to put all the government assets and all the agricultural land in Ukraine up for sale to international corporations.
Wow.
Right? And this is the most valuable asset in Europe. Ukraine's farmland is the breadbasket of Europe. For generations, 1,000 years, people have fought wars to get control of that land. 600,000 Ukrainian kids, my son fought for the Ukrainian military. These people all believe that they are fighting to keep that land in Ukraine. They don't know about this loan agreement. What does the loan agreement say? All of that land now has to be sold at auction. 30% of it has already been purchased. Who are the purchasers? Monsanto, DuPont, and I think Cargill. And who owns all of those? BlackRock. BlackRock is making the money destroying Ukraine because its companies are in charge of that. It is making the money by owning Ukraine after the war, and it just got the contract from the Biden-Harris administration to rebuild all of the buildings and bridges and infrastructure that we've destroyed over there. So this is just a big boondoggle for these companies, and these kids are dying, and we are going bankrupt in this country paying for it, and President Trump understands that, and that's why when he's standing at that press conference, and they asked him what's going to happen, he said, we are going to settle the war on day one. And he was not intimidated by Zelensky.
Yes, he
needs it. What were your thoughts as you saw President Trump and Zelensky standing next to each other? And the comments that both of them were making, and do you think that Zelensky actually wants this thing to end? Do you think, there's a part of me that deep inside of him, I think he almost wants President Trump to be reelected so that he can get, that could be a way for him to get out of the mess that he's gotten himself into. What are your thoughts on that? It's really not a bad profession. They got me on stage. Look at this. It's great. Although I don't do those fun dancing things. You see them now? I haven't done that yet.
Hey, do the Trump dance. Do the Trump dance.
Honestly, President Zelensky looked concerned as he was standing next to Trump. So much of this war has been controlled by, I don't even want to say President Biden, because as Bobby's just defined very clearly, he's not really the one calling the shots here. That when you have multiple other countries coming in and trying to bring both parties to the table from very early on and throughout this war to try to strike a peace agreement, consistently it has been Tony Blinken and the United States government telling Zelensky, don't do it. And they've got all the leverage. They've got all the leverage because they can say, well, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to pull all of the funding. It is unconscionable that there have been multiple opportunities for peace, and yet more Ukrainians are dying. More innocent Russians are dying. This war continues to escalate, putting us all at greater risk. You know, President Trump, I think this is, well, actually not I think, I know this is why you have the entire leadership, at least of the national security state, mobilized against him. These different agencies weaponized against him. It's because he is a threat to the continuation of what we have seen. He is a threat to their bottom line, because they know that if he goes in and stops this war on day one, as he has promised to do and that he is capable of doing, that turns off the tap. Not only for this direct funding, taking our taxpayer dollars into Ukraine, but as Bobby pointed out, the military-industrial complex loves this and wants to see this war continue because it requires NATO to pay for all of these brand new weapon systems. So for them, it's a cash cow. They don't want to see it end. What President Zelensky really wants, I think only he knows in his heart. He has to be accountable to the people of Ukraine. But the fact that President Trump is standing there, committing once again to peace with President Zelensky standing next to him, I think sends the strongest message that we need to hear. We look at President Zelensky's decisions throughout his recent trip here to the United States. He was out there with Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, laughing and smiling as they were signing more bombs to go and be dropped on more innocent people. He did an interview with the New Yorker magazine saying that he thinks J.D. Vance is too extreme and he doesn't think President Trump has done a good job. So, again, this is coming from the party that has demonized and created this caricature of President Trump. And you had Attorney General Merrick warning against interference in our elections by Russia. Now, he will not allow that to stand. And painting President Trump, saying no matter what he does, they won't allow interference in our election, and yet they have President Zelensky from another country coming in and essentially campaigning for Kamala Harris. And all of this is happening alongside, by the way, President Biden and Kamala Harris taking away Secret Service assets and resources from President Trump, forcing him to take his big outdoor rallies into much smaller venues, as he had to do the other day in Wisconsin, because they said, oh, we got to go and use them to go and protect foreign dignitaries like Zelensky, who have come here for the United Nations meeting. You want to talk about interference in our elections? Who benefits from that decision? From limiting President Trump's ability to interact with our fellow Americans across the country, forcing him into a smaller space. Kamala Harris benefits from that. She is benefiting from these decisions that result in what? Ultimately, as we've seen, unfortunately, multiple times, putting President Trump's life at risk.
And God made him miss.
And God made him miss. That's right.
Exactly.
That last second handout. I promised we were going to get to poison food. Because I would say that, you know, one of the best things I ever learned when I was younger was the concept of triage. And the idea that when there's an emergency, there's an explosion, there's a fire, you've got a bunch of people that are all in crisis. You know, you've got some people that have some cuts, some people that are missing an entire limb, some people are on fire, whatever that is, but you have to be able to, not emotionally, but very logically be able to look at, assess the situation and say, okay, all of these are issues, we have to address all of them, but we have to address the most important first. And I think you hit it on the head. Nuclear war is absolutely the most important thing that we need to be worried about, or that we need to be addressing in those wars. But I would say second, heavily, is the poisoning of all of us in this country and all of our children. And it's been going on for years and years and years because of not the military-industrial complex, but the agricultural and pharmaceutical-industrial complexes.
Yes!
And so, Bobby, you have campaigned, you have stood on this, you have been doing this for years, fighting for our environment, and now fighting against Big Pharma, Big Ag, to make America healthy again. And Donald, President Trump has taken you up on that and has brought you into the fold to say, yes, please.
Yes, Kennedy!
And so, could you speak on that? Could you speak to what does that mean? And ultimately, you know, what does that effort encompass? How are we going to get there? Because we all need to be healthier again.
Yeah, so just to lay out the issue, when my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, around 60% do. We're the sickest country in the world. When my uncle was president, we spent zero on our budget on chronic disease. Today, we spend $4.3 trillion. It's 5 times our military budget. The obesity rate was 3.4% when my uncle was president. Today, 74% of Americans are obese or overweight. You look at the pictures from the 60s and compare them today, it's a different species almost. And these people did not, we are a different species. And Americans think in today's era are more gluttonous. We are being mass poisoned. It is not only economically, militarily, or national security. 77% of American kids do not qualify for military service because they have chronic disease, diagnoses, or because of obesity. The fertility rates in our country and American teens are 50% less than they were 2 generations ago. Their sperm counts are 50% less. Girls in this country are hitting puberty at 8 years old. The average is 10 to 13. That's 6 years younger than it was a couple of generations ago. We have the lowest puberty rates of any country in the world. We are the most poisoned. And all of this is happening to our country because of corruption.
Wow.
That is the reason.
Yes, sir.
Our country, we have 1,000 ingredients in our food that are banned in Europe and other nations.
And you will fix it.
I'm going to fix it. I was telling Nancy the other day during this hearing on Capitol Hill, and he had 2 boxes of Fruit Loops. And one was from Canadian. They're both made by Kellogg, our company. One of them they make for Canadians and Europeans. And you look at that, and it's the colors aren't that bright. And because all of these dyes, red dye, blue dye, yellow dye, are illegal in those countries. They're illegal everywhere. And they use vegetable dyes, which are safe. But in our country, because it's cheaper, because the colors are brighter, and they think children are more likely to eat it, they use it in this country alone. So they know they're putting, and we know all of those dyes grow tumors. They all cause ADHD. They all cause a range, and it's very well documented. Nobody disagrees with that.
Does it cause cancer?
And cancer. They cause tumors. And we allow that. The reason for that is one reason. It's corruption. It's because big ag and big food.
We love you, Kennedy!
50% of FDA's budget comes from industry. So they're not working for you and me and our children. They're working to advance the mercantile interest of the corporations that have captured them. And I've been litigating against these agencies for 40 years. I've sued virtually all of them. When you sue an agency, you get a PhD in corporate capture and how to unravel it.
I love to sue people.
And I've been thinking about this for decades, about exactly what needs to be done.
Especially a city.
I've talked to President Trump about it, and he's told me that he wants me to go in there and do it, and he wants that. He wants that to be his legacy to the the American people. And I'll tell you something about President Trump. I didn't like a lot of the appointments President Trump made when he came into office. I didn't like him appointing John Bolton to run NSA and, you know, and oil industry, coal industry, pharma lobbyists to run HHS. I asked him about that when we were talking, and he said, look, last time we came in here in 2016, I had no idea how to govern. And the day that we got elected, I found out we had to have a transition team. And I was surrounded by corporate people and lobbyists from all these industries, and they said, appoint this guy, appoint that guy, and I did what they advised. And he said to me, a lot of those people were bad people. You know how he talks to them. He said, I'm not going to do that again. He said, he is thinking about his legacy, about what he is going to leave to the American people. And what he wants to leave is healthy Americans.
Yes!
He wants to make America healthy again.
He's got you, Kennedy. We're good. Trust me.
Well, this is why I wanted him to be president originally. But Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, trusts in these two individuals. He sees the integrity, the intelligence, the wisdom, and the fight that it's going to take. And we should be so lucky to have him on his transition.
Before you talk, Tulsi, let me say one thing. President Trump, right now, I'm just going to tell you, you ought to understand this. And Tulsi's much smarter than me, and she's going to say something much smarter, so I don't want to be overshadowed by her. Let me say this.
Oh my God, we love this.
The president, when he gets elected, he has to appoint 14,000 people.
Can I be one of them?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have to learn how to be quiet at meetings.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, get the hell up.
It's going to be quiet. I want the loud ones. But last time, the GAO, the General Accounting Office, pays for the transition team, and every president in history has waited till November 5th, and then they can start getting that GAO money. So what President Trump has done this time, something never been done before, is he's found private donors to finance his transition team 3 months in advance, and it's already operating. And Tulsi and I are on that team. And we are already picking the people who are going to run the government in the next administration and who are going to dismantle corporate capture.
You know, Bobby Kennedy talked a little bit about the recent meeting and gathering that they had in the U.S. Senate, talking about how do we make America healthy again. It was a bipartisan gathering of U.S. senators and different leaders who have committed their lives to this mission and this cause. And there were experts from all different fields, from the best schools in the country, from some of the best businesses in the country who are focused on actually healing people and finding the root cause of what is driving chronic illness and sickness and solving that. The Atlantic did an article about this meeting, and the headline of it, Zach knows, was the Woo-Woo Caucus. And it talked about how it was a mishmash of people who were conspiracy theorists and people chirping about things like food color, minimizing the seriousness that Bobby has just defined. how the healthcare system in our country is truly a sick care system that exists to profit big insurance and big pharma and leave the American people dependent on them so they can keep taking money out of our pockets.
You will fix it, you and Donald Trump.
This corruption that Bobby's talking about is what President Trump is committed to rooting out. And what Bobby and I are committed to doing is that in the so-called health industrial complex and the military industrial complex, and developing and building this team of people who are not swamp creatures in Washington, but who care most about the American people and our country first. This impacts all of us. This impacts all of us. When we talk about healthcare, Bobby's talking about food, and we're talking about big pharma and the drugs that they parse out to people. For those of us, I've lost track of how many friends of mine who go into the VA for help for one thing or another. Oftentimes it's for post-traumatic stress. Oftentimes it's for help with the invisible wounds that no one can see, but that unfortunately still consume too many of our friends, to the point where they feel like taking their own lives is their only way out.
Wow.
And still, within the VA, a healthcare system that is run by our government, instead of giving them the actual help that they need, too often they're given, quite literally, a sack full of drugs.
Wow.
As though that is somehow going to help solve their problems. It's disgusting, because too many of them push those drugs to the side, or it is the direct result of those drugs that drive them to suicide. When we talk about healthcare, what we are talking about, what President Trump is talking about, is our whole health and well-being. That is, yes, it is our physical health. It is our mental health, our state of mind. It is our spiritual health and well-being as individuals and as a country. Directly addressing those corrosive and corruptive elements that are driving us apart. Finding real solutions by addressing the root cause of these problems. You're going to continue to see more headlines like The Atlantic. Why? Because all of these, it's the propaganda media that profits from this. They're all in cahoots and colluding with each other. And the biggest takeaway that we need from this is it is their big money and their power against the people. We outnumber them. We are louder than them. And as our founders intended, they were visionary and wise. They recognized the vulnerability and the likelihood that once people achieve power, what do? They want more. And so they created this Constitution and this Republic based on the fact and the truth that this government only exists with the consent of the governed. And that it is we the people, and only we the people who can save this country. And that, and nothing short of that, is what is on the line in this election. Which is why it's so important, not only for every one of us here today, to make sure that we go out and vote for freedom, peace, and prosperity by voting for Donald Trump, but we got to bring the people with us.